Welcome, travelers, to Terrors in the Wild, where the line between myth and reality blurs in the darkest corners of the earth. Here, we unravel the most terrifying cryptids, dive deep into chilling horror stories, and explore the mysteries that haunt the wilderness. From shape-shifting monsters to forgotten legends, we uncover the creatures and tales that lurk just beyond the reach of human understanding. So, keep your wits sharp, hit that subscribe button, and prepare for a journey into the unknown. The wild is waiting, but beware. It's not just the animals you should fear.
The Appalachian Dogman. The Appalachian Mountains were as ancient as the earth itself. Rolling peaks wrapped in mist, forests thick and untouched, and valleys so deep that even the sun struggled to touch the ground. To anyone who didn't know the land, it was a place of quiet beauty. But to those who had lived among the crags and hollows for generations, it was a place where something darker lingered, a place where the past never quite let go. And sometimes, when the fog was thick and the winds began to howl, there were whispers of something else, something older than the hills themselves, the Appalachian Dogman. Aidan Owens had heard the story 100 times growing up in the town of Red Hollow. Every child in town had. It was an old legend, passed down in half-shouted whispers at campfires and told by elders in dark corners of the local tavern. It was the kind of tale that made people uneasy, but still curious, because deep down, everyone knew there was something more to it. Aidan had grown up surrounded by the dense woods, his father a local guide who often led tourists on hikes through the nearby mountains. The Appalachian Dogman was a subject his father would never bring up, but he knew it bothered him. The old-timers, the ones who still lived in the creaky houses along the mountain's edge, always spoke of the creature in the same way, half man, half beast, roaming the forest with an insatiable hunger, its yellow eyes gleaming in the dark. Some said it was the spirit of an ancient hunter, cursed to roam the mountains. Others said it was something much older, something predating man itself. The description was always the same. A creature with the body of a man, covered in matted fur, long claws, and a face like a wolf. Its eyes glowing, its growl reverberating in the chest, its howl echoing in the night air. The Dogman was never seen in full. It was always a fleeting shadow, a brief glimpse through the trees, a howl in the distance, but no one could deny that something lived in the woods, something that left strange tracks in the dirt and made the animals uneasy. And for years, Aidan thought it was just a myth, a way for the locals to scare children or keep outsiders out of the woods. Until the summer of his 24th year. Aidan had always been drawn to the mountains. After a few years of living in the city, working a dead-end office job, he found himself longing for something more. The simplicity of the woods, the quietude of a life far removed from the constant noise of technology and modern living. He had recently returned home, staying with his father in the old house on the edge of Red Hollow, hoping to reconnect with the place where he had spent his childhood. One evening, as Aidan sat on the porch, his father emerged from the house, wiping his hands on his work shirt. He stood for a moment, looking out over the darkening woods. "You planning to do any hiking while you're here?" his father asked, his voice gruff as always, but his eyes wary. Aidan looked up from his phone, where he had been scrolling through messages from his friends. "I was thinking about it. Maybe head out tomorrow for a few days, get some fresh air." His father's expression hardened. "You sure about that?" Aidan frowned. "What's wrong? You know I'm not a kid anymore. I'll be fine." His father didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lit a cigarette and took a long drag, staring out at the mountains, his face partially obscured by smoke. "It's not about you being a kid," his father finally said, his voice low. "It's the woods, son. They change you." Aidan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" His father looked over at him then, eyes dark and unreadable. "You know the stories. The ones about the Dogman. They ain't just stories, Aidan. Not all of them, anyway. Aiden chuckled nervously, though his throat felt tight. Come on, Dad. You're not still on about that old legend, are you? His father didn't respond. Instead, he flicked the cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his boot. Just be careful out there. Don't go too far into the woods. And don't go near the old logging trails. Aiden thought his father was just being protective, as he always had been. But something about the way he said it sent a shiver down his spine. The woods felt different that night. Darker, deeper, as though the trees themselves were listening, waiting. The next morning, Aiden packed his gear and set off alone, determined to prove he wasn't afraid of some old legend. He left the house early, his father still asleep, and drove to a trailhead just outside of Red Hollow. The hike he had planned wasn't long, just a few days in the mountains, camping by a creek, far enough from civilization to get away, but not too far to feel out of his depth. The weather was perfect, sunny, but with a cool breeze that rustled the leaves. The forest was alive with sounds, birds calling to each other, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the soft creak of old trees shifting in the wind. Aiden breathed in the fresh air, feeling a sense of peace settle over him as he hiked deeper into the woods. By mid-afternoon, he found a spot near a small stream and set up camp. As the light began to fade, he started a small fire and settled back, enjoying the stillness. But as night crept in, something began to feel off. The air grew colder. The wind, once soft, now howled through the trees, carrying with it a strange, almost metallic scent that made Aiden's skin crawl. He thought he heard something moving in the woods, but whenever he turned to look, there was nothing. His campfire flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the ground. A sound broke the silence. A low, guttural growl, deep and throaty, like the sound of a wolf, but much, much larger. Aiden froze. His heart raced as he listened, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. The growl came again, closer this time, echoing through the trees. Aiden scrambled to his feet, grabbing his flashlight and scanning the forest around him. There was nothing, only the thick darkness of the trees, the swirling mists creeping in from the valley below. The growl came again, closer. It was low, almost like a warning. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced with the stories his father had told him as a child, the whispered warnings from the old men at the bar. He laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. It's just a bear, he muttered to himself, though he knew in his gut that it wasn't. He took a step back, his flashlight shaking in his hand. The growl echoed again, a little louder this time, coming from deeper in the woods. And then, just when Aiden thought he might have imagined it, he heard it. A howl. A long, mournful sound that sent a chill through his bones. It was too close. Too human. Aiden's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed his backpack, hurriedly stuffing his things into it. He wasn't sure what he was running from, but his instincts screamed that he needed to get out. He turned toward the trail, but as he stepped forward, something caught his eye. A movement, just at the edge of the light. A shadow, tall and dark, standing between the trees. A figure, part man, part beast. Its eyes glowing a faint yellow in the dim light. For a moment, Aiden couldn't move, his body frozen in terror. The creature stood still, its eyes locked onto him, its massive form barely visible in the darkness. Then, without a sound, it moved. Too fast, too silently, vanishing into the woods as though it had never been there. Aiden didn't wait to find out what it was. He turned and fled, stumbling down the trail, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, he could hear the growl again, closer now, as though it was right on his heels. Aiden ran through the darkened forest, branches scratching at his skin, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't care. All that mattered was getting away from whatever had been out there in the woods with him. The forest was alive with sound, strange rustling in the trees, the snap of twigs underfoot, the distant howl of the creature behind him, closer now. Aiden's legs burned with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. Not yet. He glanced over his shoulder, and for just a moment he saw it. A shadow, large and looming, moving between the trees with terrifying speed. The creature was hunting him. Aiden's heart lurched. He could hear it now, the sound of claws scraping against bark, the heavy panting of something far larger than any animal he had ever known. And then, just when he thought he might be caught, the trees opened up. The trailhead was just ahead. With a burst of energy, Aiden broke into a sprint, stumbling onto the open road where his car was parked, its headlights a beacon in the dark. He didn't stop to think. He didn't care if he had to leave his gear behind. He just needed to get away. The moment he slammed the door of his car shut, the growling stopped. The silence was deafening. The forest around him seemed still, as though the mountains were holding their breath. Aiden's hands were shaking as he started the engine, the headlights cutting through the darkness as he sped down the winding mountain road. Behind him, in the depths of the woods, something watched. The Appalachian Dogman was still out there, and it was waiting.
As this story ends, remember, out here in the wild, the terrors never truly vanish. They're always watching, waiting. If you dare to face them again, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know when the next nightmare will find you. Until then, stay safe or stay scared.